The sun was hot above the alien market, burning down on the long rows of stalls. The air was thick with the smell of spices, cooked meat, and sweat. Traders shouted about their goods, holding up bright fabrics, strange fruit, and weapons made from shining metal. Shoppers argued over prices. Coins clinked in hands, and voices rose and fell like waves. But in the center of the market, where a small crowd had gathered, there was something different. A small alien girl stood alone on a raised wooden platform. She had no clothes. Her skin was pale under the harsh light, and dust clung to her like a second skin. Her black hair hung in messy strands over her face. Her hands were clenched at her sides, and she kept her head down. The crowd around her was not quiet. People laughed. They pointed at her. Some tossed bits of rotten fruit at her bare feet. Others whispered cruel jokes. A tall alien merchant with scaled green skin stood beside her. His long fingers gripped a staff, and his voice was loud enough to carry over the noise. Worthless, he called her. She is nothing. No one wants her, not even her own kind. His words made the crowd laugh harder. Someone shouted, "Then why is she here?" The merchant grinned. "For fun, let the people see what happens to those who are not useful." The girl did not look at him. She kept staring at the wooden boards under her feet. Her jaw was tight. She did not cry, not even when a small stone struck her leg. She only shifted her weight and stood straighter. Through the crowd, a man walked. His clothes marked him as an off-worlder, a human. His name was Daniel. He had come to the market to trade for tools and food, but the sound of laughter had pulled him in this direction. He stopped when he saw the girl. Daniel's eyes narrowed. There was something in her posture, a quiet strength. Even as people tried to humiliate her, he stepped closer, hearing the voices around him. The merchant noticed him and smirked. "Ah, human," he said loudly. "Want to join in? Throw something, it's free." The people laughed again, waiting for Daniel to answer. But Daniel did not laugh. He stepped up to the platform. His eyes met the girl's for the first time. She looked at him quickly, then backed down, as if afraid to be seen. Daniel said nothing. Instead, he reached for the buttons of his coat. It was a long, dark coat, worn but clean. The crowd quieted, watching. The merchant tilted his head, confused. Daniel took off the coat slowly, his hands steady. Then, without a word, he draped it over the girl's shoulders. The fabric covered her thin frame completely. She froze, her hands clutching the edges tightly. Her head lifted just a little, her eyes wide with shock. The market fell into silence. No one had expected this. The merchant's smile faded. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Daniel looked at him calmly. "Covering her," he said. The merchant's voice rose. "She is nothing. She is not worth." Daniel cut him off. "She's worth more than your words." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people frowned. Some shook their heads. Others whispered that the human was a fool. The merchant crossed his arms. "If you take her, she is yours," he warned. "That means her debts, her troubles, her enemies. You'll regret it." Daniel didn't move. "Then I'll take her," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were firm. The merchant stared at him for a moment, then let out a sharp laugh. "Fine. Sign your name at the guard post. You'll see what a mistake you've made." The girl looked between them, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak. But no words came. Daniel stepped back and held out his hand to her. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her small, cold hand in his. As they stepped down from the platform, the crowd parted. Some still whispered, but no one stopped them. The merchant watched them go, his eyes full of something between anger and amusement. Daniel led the girl away from the center of the market. The coat hung heavy on her small frame, but she held it close. Every few steps, she glanced over her shoulder. as if afraid someone would drag her back. Daniel didn't speak yet. He knew there would be time for questions later, right now. The most important thing was to get her away from the place where people had treated her like she was less than nothing. And so the human and the alien girl walked together out of the market. Leaving the noise and cruelty behind, neither of them knew it yet, but that single act, one coat. One choice would change both their lives forever. The streets outside the market were quieter, but the sound of the crowd still echoed behind them. Daniel walked with steady steps, keeping his hand lightly around the girl's arm so she wouldn't get lost. The coat hung loosely over her shoulders, and each time the wind tugged at it, she pulled it tighter. As if afraid someone might take it away, they reached a shaded alley where the noise faded. Daniel stopped, turning toward her. "You're safe now," he said gently. The girl's eyes lifted for a brief moment. Studying his face, her lips parted, and she whispered something in a soft, fluffy, unfamiliar language. The words were quick and quiet, and though Daniel didn't understand them, the tone sounded like confusion or disbelief. She lowered her gaze again, shifting her weight. Her bare feet were dusty, the skin scratched and sore. Daniel crouched to her level so his voice wouldn't sound sharp. "I'm Daniel," he said, placing a hand lightly over his chest. Then he gestured toward her. "You?" The girl hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the ground, then back to him. "Lyra," she said finally. Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't spoken in a long time. Daniel nodded slowly, repeating the name, Lyra. Footsteps sounded at the end of the alley. Daniel turned to see two alien guards approaching. They were tall, wearing dark armor plates and carrying short batons at their sides. One of them looked directly at Daniel. "You're the human who took the street slave," he said flatly. Daniel rose to his feet, keeping Lyra behind him. "I gave her my coat," he said evenly. The guard's expression didn't change. "Then she's yours," he replied. "That means you take on everything: her debts, her crimes, and her danger." Lyra's grip tightened on the coat. Daniel glanced at her. "What crimes?" he asked the guard. The alien's eyes narrowed. "She was born in the wrong place, to the wrong blood." His voice carried no pity, only finality. "That's all the crime she needed." Daniel's jaw tightened. He stepped closer. "What do I need to do?" The guard tapped the device at his side. "Sign at the post near the east gate, and she's officially yours." He leaned forward slightly. "But don't expect thanks. Girls like her bring trouble." The guards walked away without waiting for an answer. Lyra watched them until they turned the corner, then looked up at Daniel. You don't have to keep me," she said, in a voice so quiet it was almost lost to the wind. Daniel shook his head. "I didn't cover you to give you back." His voice was firm, and for the first time, Lyra's expression softened just a little. She blinked quickly, almost as if holding back tears. They walked again, heading toward the east gate. The ground turned from smooth stone to rough dirt, and the shouts of traders faded behind them. Lyra kept glancing at the coat, then at Daniel, as if trying to solve a puzzle in her head. When they reached the guard post, the same two officers from before were waiting. Daniel stepped forward, took the digital slate, and signed his name without hesitation. The guard tapped the entry into the system and handed him a small metal token. "That's your proof," he said. "She's yours now. Take care, human." His tone suggested he didn't believe Daniel would last a week. Lyra stared at the token in Daniel's hand, then looked at him. "Why?" she asked suddenly. Daniel glanced at her. "Why? What? Why give me this?" she said, clutching the coat tighter. "Why not just leave me?" He thought for a moment, then gave a small shrug. "Because no one should stand alone like that." His words were simple, but they made her blink again, like she wasn't used to hearing them. As they stepped away from the gate, a voice called from behind. It was the scaled merchant from the market. His long green fingers curled as he smirked. "She cost you more than she's worth, human," he said. "You'll see, Daniel." Didn't answer, he simply turned and walked on, leading Lyra toward the quieter streets. The merchant's laughter followed them for a while before fading. The sun was lower now, and the air was cooler. Lyra's pace slowed, her bare feet dragging. Daniel noticed and stopped at a small corner stall, buying a pair of worn sandals from an old vendor. He knelt and helped her slip them on. Her toes curled against the straps, and she looked at him strangely. They continued on, moving toward the part of the city where Daniel rented a small home. Every so often, Lyra would glance back over her shoulder. Her hands never left the coat. When they finally reached the narrow street of stone houses, Daniel led her to a plain wooden door, unlocking it with a small metal key. Inside, it was simpler single table, a chair, a bed, and a shelf with a few tools. Lyra stepped in cautiously, her eyes moving from corner to corner. Daniel gestured to the bed. "You can rest there," he said. She stayed standing, her bare shoulders still tense. Daniel didn't push her. Instead, he placed a small plate of bread and dried fruit on the table. "Eat if you're hungry," he said. Then he stepped back, giving her space. Lyra stared at the food for a long moment before taking one piece of bread. She nibbled slowly, as though expecting someone to snatch it away. But when she finished, Daniel only offered more. For the first time, her grip on the coat loosened slightly. The next morning, the sound of voices drifted through the narrow street outside Daniel's home. Lyra sat on the bed, knees pulled close to her chest. The coat he had given her was still wrapped tightly around her small frame. Even though the room was warm, her eyes followed the light creeping in through the small window. Daniel was at the table, fixing a broken clasp on one of his tools. He had work to do that day, but he kept glancing at her. She hadn't spoken much since they arrived, only answering questions in short, quiet words. Still, he could see her eyes moving, watching, thinking. A sudden knock on the door made her flinch. Daniel stood, crossing the small room to open it. On the other side were two alien guards, not the same ones from yesterday, but dressed in the same dark armor. Their expressions were hard and without warmth. "You are Daniel," one of them said. Daniel nodded. The guard continued, "We have been told you have taken custody of the hybrid girl called Lyra." His tone made the words sound like an accusation. Daniel stepped aside so they could see her sitting on the bed. The guard's gaze swept over her, lingering for a moment on the coat around her shoulders. "Do you understand," he said, "that by law, you are now responsible for her debts, her food, her safety, and any crimes she commits?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I understand," he said. The second guard stepped forward. Holding a small digital board, "You will sign here again to confirm your intent." Lyra's eyes widened. She shook her head quickly. "Don't," she whispered. "If you do this, they'll come for you too." Her voice trembled. Daniel looked at her for a long moment before taking the board. His hand moved steadily as he wrote his name. The guards exchanged a look, one of them smirking as if amused. "You are either brave or foolish." "Human," the first guard said, "her kind. They do not last long, and those who protect them often share their fate." "I'll take my chances," Daniel replied. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. When the guards left, Lyra stared at him. "Why?" she asked again, her voice a whisper. "Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me." Daniel leaned against the table, folding his arms. "I don't need to know you to know what's right," he said. "No one should be treated the way they treated you." She looked down at the floor, pulling the coat tighter. "Kindness always costs something," she said quietly. "And when the cost comes, it is always the girl who pays." Before Daniel could answer, a sharp voice called from outside. The scaled green merchant from the market stood in the street, a cruel smile twisting his face. "Human," He shouted, "You think you've done something noble? She's a curse. You'll regret this before the week is done." Daniel opened the door, stepping outside. "Stay inside," he told Lyra. His tone was gentle but firm. She obeyed, watching. Through a narrow crack in the door, the merchant walked closer, hands clasped behind his back. "I thought it was amusing yesterday," he said. "But I see now you're serious. You want her? Fine. But do you know why no one else does? Do you know why she was on that platform?" "I know enough," Daniel said, his voice steady. The merchant chuckled darkly. "She is marked human, not with ink, but with blood. Her mother's people. We're rebels. Her father was a deserter. She has no place here, no rights. The law will not protect her. And now that you've claimed her, it will not protect you either." Daniel didn't flinch. "Then I'll protect her myself." The merchant's smile faded, replaced with something colder. "We'll see," he said, before walking away. His footsteps echoed down the street. But his words lingered when Daniel went back inside. Lyra was still sitting on the bed. She looked at him carefully, as though trying to decide if he was foolish or brave. "You should let me go," she said quietly. "If I stay, they will come. For me, and you will be caught in it too." Daniel shook his head. "If I let you go, they'll find you. And this time, there won't be anyone to stop them." She pressed her lips together, saying nothing. But her hands trembled slightly. That evening, Daniel prepared a simple meal. Lyra ate slowly, her eyes darting to the door every time a sound came from outside. As night fell, Daniel placed a small blanket on the bed beside her. "You should sleep," he said. "We'll talk more tomorrow." Lyra hesitated, then finally lay down. She did not close her eyes right away. Instead, she kept staring at Daniel, as if trying to understand why he had made the choice he did. Outside, in the shadows of the narrow street, two dark figures lingered, watching the small home with cold, patient eyes. They would not move tonight, but soon. They would test the human's decision, and soon, Lyra would learn whether kindness was truly worth the danger it brought. The next morning, pale light crept into the small room through the narrow window. Lyra was awake before Daniel, sitting cross-legged on the bed with the coat still wrapped tightly around her. She had slept in it, as if letting go of it meant it would be taken away. Her eyes moved slowly around the room, tracing every corner as if memorizing it. Daniel stirred and sat up, stretching his arms. He glanced at her and gave a small smile. "Morning," he said softly. She didn't reply. But her eyes flicked toward him for a moment before dropping back to the floor. He rose and filled a small pot with water from the corner jug, setting it on a heat plate. The smell of something warm soon filled the air. Lyra's head lifted slightly, watching the steam rise. "I don't have much," Daniel said, "but you'll eat." He placed a small bowl of soup and a piece of bread on the table. Lyra stayed where she was, hesitant. "It's yours," he added. Nodding toward the table, slowly she slid off the bed. Her bare feet quiet on the floor, she moved like someone who is used to being told no, pausing at each step as if waiting to be stopped. When she reached the table, she sat carefully, picking up the bread and holding it in both hands. She sniffed it first, then took a small bite. Chewing slowly, Daniel ate across from her, not rushing, not staring, letting her take her time. After a few bites, she glanced up at him. "You made this?" she asked softly. Her voice was rough, but there was a trace of curiosity in it. "Yes," he said. "You'll get more when she finished." Daniel gave her a bundle of folded clothes. "These are clean," he said. "You can change the washrooms through there." He pointed to a small door at the back. Lyra took the bundle, holding it like something fragile. She disappeared into the washroom and closed the door quietly. Daniel listened to the faint rustle of fabric, the sound of water splashing. When she came back out, the difference was small but sharp. The dirt had been wiped from her skin. Hair hung a little smoother, and the loose shirt and trousers he had given her covered her fully. She still clutched the coat, draping it over her shoulders like armor. Daniel said nothing, only nodding once. The day passed quietly. Daniel repaired tools for his small trading work, while Lyra sat by the window. Watching the street, every time footsteps passed, her shoulders tensed. At midday, he gave her another plate of food. And she ate more quickly this time, as if beginning to trust it would not be taken away. As evening came, rain began to fall outside. The sound of it against the stone street was steady. The air turned cooler, and Lyra drew the coat tighter. Daniel lit a small lamp, filling the room with soft yellow light. He sat at the table. "Working on a piece of equipment, you can sleep whenever you want," he said. "The bed is yours." She glanced at him sharply. "Yours too?" She asked, almost suspicious. "I'll take the chair," he said. "You need rest more than I do." She looked at him for a long moment, then shifted on the bed, still sitting upright. Her eyes were on the door. "They will come," she murmured. Almost to herself, Daniel put his tool down. "Then I'll be here when they do." Her brow furrowed. "No one waits," she said, "not for me." That night she lay down, but did not sleep. Daniel dozed in the chair, the faint creak of wood under him, the only sound besides the rain. At some point, she sat up again, watching him, as if trying to understand. The strange kind of human who would bring her into his home without asking anything in return. When dawn came, the rain had stopped, but the street smelled of wet stone. Daniel rose and checked the latch on the door. Then he handed her a small piece of fruit. "Eat," he said simply. They were halfway through breakfast when a shadow passed the window. Daniel's eyes flicked toward it, but the figure moved on. Lyra's fingers tightened around her bread. "They're watching," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "I know." She lowered her gaze, but her voice carried a trace of something new, uncertainty mixed with the smallest spark of hope. For the first time, she was somewhere she could close her eyes without expecting to be kicked awake. It wasn't much, Daniel knew, but for her, it was the first shelter she'd had in a long, long time. The following days passed slowly. The market noise still reached Daniel's small home every morning, but Lyra never asked to go outside. She stayed near the window, watching the street from behind the coat's folds. Daniel worked on his tools, sometimes speaking, sometimes just letting the quiet sit between them. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip, Daniel noticed her sitting with her back to the wall, knees drawn up, staring at the floor. Her face was distant and her hands were clenched tightly. He put down the wrench he was holding and sat across from her. "You're safe here," he said gently. "No one will hurt you." She didn't look up. "That's what people say," she murmured. "They say it before they hurt you." Daniel leaned back slightly, letting her words settle. He didn't push her to explain, but after a long silence, she began to speak. Her voice was low, flat, as if she were reading from a list of facts rather than telling a story. "I was born in the South Quarter," she said. "It's where the hybrids live, the ones who aren't pure blood anything. My father was from a worker clan. My mother, she was from the resistance. They called her dangerous. So they took her away when I was little." She paused, her fingers pulling at the hem of the coat. "I lived with others, in a building that leaked when it rained. We weren't allowed to work, so we begged. Sometimes people threw coins, sometimes rocks." She gave a small, humorless smile. "I learned to tell the difference by the sound they made when they hit the ground." Daniel's jaw tightened. He stayed silent, letting her go on. "When I was 10, I tried to steal bread from a stall," she said. "I was caught. They said it was my second crime. Being born was the first, so they took me to the market, not to sell. Just to show what happens when you step out of your place." Her eyes dropped. They laughed. The room felt colder. Daniel rested his elbows on his knees. "How long were you out there before I came?" he asked. "A day," she whispered. "They gave me no food, no water. I was told if I begged, they'd cut my tongue." She glanced toward the window. "And then you came." He could see she didn't fully trust what that meant. Not yet. Her posture still carried years of expecting betrayal. "Lyra," Daniel said carefully, "I'm not them." She looked at him sharply. "Everyone says that," she replied, "until they need something from you." Before Daniel could answer, a faint noise came from outside, a slow, deliberate footsteps stopping by the door. Lyra stiffened immediately. Daniel's hand moved toward the small blade he kept near his tools. The sound lingered for a moment, then faded. Lyra's eyes stayed fixed on the door. "They're watching," she said again. Her voice had no doubt in it. Daniel nodded. "Then they know I'm not giving you back." That night, the air was heavy, and the sky outside the small window was dark with clouds. Lyra lay on the bed but didn't close her eyes. Her gaze followed the shadows on the wall. Daniel sat in the chair, the faint glow from the lamp casting long shapes around the room. "You should sleep," he said quietly. "I used to sleep in the alleys," she murmured. "I learned to keep one eye open." Daniel didn't try to convince her otherwise. He knew trust wasn't built in a few days. It was something earned, brick by brick. She turned her face toward him, her expression unreadable. "You'll leave." "One day," she said, not as a question, but as a fact. "Not unless you ask me to," he replied. His voice was steady. And he meant it. For the first time, she didn't argue. She simply pulled the coat tighter and looked toward the window again. Outside, in the narrow street, a shadow paused under the dim lantern light, watching the small house. Whoever it was didn't move for a long time, as if waiting, as if planning, inside. Lyra's eyes slowly closed, not because she felt safe yet, but because exhaustion finally won. Daniel stayed awake a while longer, listening to the quiet, his mind already bracing for the trouble he knew was coming. The night air was still, too still. Even the usual hum of the street outside Daniel's home seemed to have disappeared. Lyra lay on the bed, eyes closed, but not asleep. The coat was wrapped around her like a shield. Daniel sat by the table, sharpening a small utility blade. He wasn't expecting trouble tonight, but the quiet made his instincts itch. A faint sound broke the silence. It wasn't the wind. It was a slow, dragging step just outside the door. Daniel's hands stilled. His eyes moved to the wooden door. His voice stayed calm when he spoke. "Lyra," he said quietly, "stay on." The bed, she sat up instantly, tension tightening every line of her small frame. "They're here," she whispered. Her voice was barely a breath, but it carried certainty. The sound of the steps stopped, replaced by a soft tap, once, twice, like a signal. Then, without warning, the door burst open. 3 figures stepped inside, tall and broad, alien skin glinting in the dim light. Their faces were half covered by dark cloth, but their eyes burned with cold purpose. The one in front spoke first. His voice low and sharp. "We've come for the girl." His gaze slid toward Lyra, who had pressed herself against the wall, clutching the coat tighter. "She's not going anywhere," Daniel said, rising to his feet. His voice was calm, but his stance made it clear he wasn't moving aside. The leader tilted his head. "You think you can keep what doesn't belong to you? She's property." His hand moved to the hilt of a short blade at his belt. "She belongs to herself," Daniel replied, taking a slow step forward. The 2 behind the leader moved suddenly, one lunging toward the bed. Lyra let out a short cry. Daniel stepped into the attacker's path, driving his shoulder hard into the alien's chest. The force sent them both stumbling back. The second attacker swung a heavy fist at Daniel, catching his side. Pain shot through his ribs, but he didn't go down. Instead, he twisted. driving his elbow into the attacker's jaw. The crack of bone echoed in the small room. The leader moved in now, drawing his blade. Daniel's own knife was smaller, but he gripped it tight, blocking the first slash and countering with a quick jab that forced the leader back a step. In the chaos, Lyra moved. Her eyes were wide with fear, but her hands found the metal rod Daniel used to prop the window. Without thinking, she gripped it and swung hard at the attacker nearest her. The blow landed with a dull thud, and the alien stumbled, clutching his shoulder. Daniel seized the moment, grabbing the leader's wrist and twisting hard. The blade clattered to the floor. Daniel kicked it aside, his breathing heavy. "You have no idea who you're crossing," the leader snarled. "This isn't over." Daniel didn't answer. He stepped forward, forcing the three of them toward the open door. One spat on the floor before slipping into the night. The others followed, their footsteps fading into the darkness. The room was silent again, except for Daniel's uneven breathing. He turned to Lyra, who was still holding the metal rod. Her hands trembled, but her grip was tight. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded quickly, though her wide eyes told another story. Daniel set the door back in place, locking it with both the latch and a bar. Then he sat down heavily in the chair, pressing a hand to the bruise forming along his side. Lyra moved closer, still clutching the rod. She knelt beside him, her voice soft but steady. "No one's ever fought for me before." Daniel met her gaze. "Get used to it," he said. Trying for a small smile, her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something else, but instead, she simply reached out and placed the rod on the table. Then she sat on the floor near his chair, as if her nearness was the only way she could be sure he wouldn't disappear in the night. Outside, the street was quiet again, but both of them knew this wasn't the end. The people who wanted her back wouldn't stop. The next time, they might. Not come in threes. Daniel glanced at her. Seeing how she leaned against the wall with her coat wrapped tight, she was still scared. But there was something different now, something that hadn't been there before. A tiny spark of belief, fragile but real. He didn't know how long they had before the next fight. But he knew one thing for certain. Whoever came next would find him standing in their way again. The morning after the attack, the city was already buzzing with rumors. Daniel heard fragments of them drifting through the street, how a human had fought off 3 armed men, how he had claimed the worthless alien girl and refused to give her back, how he was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Inside the small house, Lyra sat by the window, her knees drawn up under the coat. She watched people passing outside, some glancing toward the house, some whispering as they walked. Daniel was repairing a broken clasp on his satchel, but his eyes kept flicking toward her. "You're safe," he said quietly. Not for the first time, she didn't turn to look at him. "Safe until they come again," she murmured. Her voice was calm, but there was a question hidden inside it. Daniel set down the clasp. "When they come again, we'll handle it," he replied. His voice carried no doubt. Later that day, Daniel needed supplies. He hesitated to leave her behind, but Lyra surprised him. "I'll come," she said. Her tone wasn't eager, was steady, determined, as if she had decided to stop hiding. The market was loud as always, the smell of food mixed with the sharp tang of metal and dust. People noticed them immediately. Whispers followed their steps. Daniel kept walking, his hand lightly at Lyra's shoulder to guide her through the crowd. When they reached the center square, the laughter from a few days ago echoed in Daniel's memory. He felt Lyra slow beside him, her eyes locked on the raised platform where she had stood, naked and mocked. Now she stood there in his coat, the fabric draped like a banner. Some of the same faces from before were in the crowd. The scaled green merchant was among them, leaning against a stall, his eyes narrowed as he saw her. Lyra didn't look away this time. She stepped forward, her chin lifting, Daniel stood beside her, silent but present. An old woman in the crowd muttered, "That's her, the street slave." Someone else whispered, "And that's the human." Another voice added, "He fought for her." The merchant smirked, calling out loud enough for all to hear, "Still carrying dead weight. Human." Daniel didn't answer, but Lyra did. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Better to carry weight than to throw it away." The crowd stilled for a moment. Her words were not shouted, but they carried. The merchant's smirk faltered. Daniel led her away from the square, but the murmurs followed. This time, they weren't all quarrelsome, were curious. Some even approving. On their way back, they passed a small boy sitting by the road. His clothes torn, his face streaked with dirt. He held a crust of bread, so old and hard it looked like stone. Lyra slowed, reaching into the coat pocket. She pulled out the half-loaf Daniel had given her earlier and knelt to hand it to the boy. The boy stared at her, then took it without a word. His eyes darted to Daniel, who only nodded. Lyra stood again, a faint, unreadable expression on her face. Back at the house, Daniel poured water into 2 cups, handing one to her. "You didn't have to give that bread away," he said. She looked at him steadily. "I had enough then." After a pause, "Once, I was that boy. No one gave me anything. I don't want to be like them." For the first time, Daniel saw her. Without the wall in her eyes, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was choosing who she wanted to be. Days passed, and the story of the human and the alien girl spread beyond their street. People still stared, but now there were nods of respect. Among the whispers, a few merchants even offered them small discounts. Not out of pity, but out of recognition. One evening, Daniel returned from trading to find Lyra outside the door. She wasn't hiding, she was standing in the open, watching the sunset. The coat was still around her shoulders, but her stance was different. Strong, "They'll still come," she said when he joined her, "Then we'll still be ready." He replied. She glanced up at him. "When you gave me this coat, I thought it was just cloth." She touched the fabric lightly. "Now I think maybe it's something else." Daniel smiled faintly. "It's yours now. You can decide what it means." As the last light faded, they went inside, closing the door, not out of fear, but because it was their home for the first time since she had met him. Lyra didn't look over her shoulder. The girl who had once stood on a platform, mocked and exposed, now walked with her head high. And the human who had once been a stranger was no longer just the man who gave her his coat. He was the one who had given her back her dignity in a city where kindness was rare. That single act had changed everything, and neither of them intended to go back.